Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Sam Aparicio from the We're from the Valley podcast, and today I get to collaborate with Andres Bernal. Andres, thanks for having me, man.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm glad that you reached out, that we were able to link up and get connected. Honestly, man, I love collaborating with people from the Valley, and when you hit me up, I was like, dude, this is a perfect opportunity. Let's do it. So thanks again for having me, man. So we were getting to catch up just a little bit ago. I know that you're out living in New York. Tell me a little bit about how things are going out there, and just catching up, man. Let's just chat it up.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, again, first of all, thanks for having me. I know I got to check out an episode that you had recorded before, and I thought it was just a great concept and just something really cool coming out of back home here in the Valley. So, good stuff. I've been in New York City now for going on 9 years, and things are going well. It's a constantly evolving journey. Things are always changing, but interestingly enough, I come back home every few months, and it continues to be like a home base. And like many people say, right, New York could be one of those cities that's very chaotic, and there are aspects of that I absolutely love, and that are very much aligned with the kind of person I am in terms of just everything that's available there and all these different things happening at once, the different opportunities. But at the same time, the Valley remains kind of a place for me to come back and recharge and connect with family, connect with lifelong friends, and get that sense of like slow down a little bit, find some peace, regroup, reflect, and then go back out there with wherever life is leading me to.
For sure. I love that you said slow down, and that's what we were talking about earlier. I love how the Valley is a place where the pace of life is slower, right? Where you feel like you can kind of take a breath here. I've lived in bigger cities. I've lived in Austin, lived in, Seoul, South Korea, and great stuff going on. There's, the big cities, there's a lot to do, but here in the Valley, it's more chill, and I think, like, that's its charm, right? That you get to come back and you feel like, man, I'm just going to go for a walk and just kind of feel that things are more chill here. And I love that about the Valley. I do. And so it's cool that you have kind of like a base here, like you said. You have, your place here where you can come back and regroup. And I do feel that same way where, I enjoy that pace of life. I think it's a great place to like raise a family too. Mm-hmm. It's like life is a little bit slower here. You don't have to go through the craziness of like I-35 like in Austin or what have you, and I'm sure, like you said, it's crazy and fast-paced in New York, even more fast-paced, no?
Than Austin? Yeah, significantly more fast-paced than Austin. Yeah, I mean, I think coming back home here to the Valley, once you're a little bit older, you find new things to appreciate from here. You connect with people that maybe you didn't talk to as much before, but you discover that you have a lot of things in common and different alignments. You care about different aspects of the Valley. You can get involved in different things. So that is also kind of a cool development as we grow and learn and, work on our own goals and objectives. We have a different relationship to the places that we're from and the places that we care about. And so the Valley is certainly one of those places for me. It's interesting, too, because, I wasn't born here. I grew up most of my life in the Valley, but I'm from Colombia. I was born in Colombia, and that kind of gives it another dimension of, discovering the Valley and learning about the Valley, being from somewhere else as a child, and kind of developing layers of, my identity around a different mix of things. And the Valley itself is in a place that is a mix of things, right? It's a border town. And, like Gloria Anzaldúa writes, right, this is kind of a very special place for that reason. And a lot of, folks have written about how, one can feel like you're not from any one place living here in the Valley because you have these different cultural roots and influences. And so being able to feel like you have different parts of yourself, you carry different parts of an identity, is something that I've grown to develop and kind of used as an asset to who I am and how I approach my different goals and things like that, and how I approach life in general. And that's certainly something that you learn to cultivate living here too.
Yeah, I agree, man. I consider it the best of both worlds
Right.
here in the Valley because, I mean, you're in the USA, but you understand that there's a huge Hispanic culture here, the Hispanic demographic here. I mean, UTRGV, the local university, I mean, it's a majority of Hispanic students. And so I consider it the best of both worlds. I get to kind of get the benefits, and Mexico is literally a hop away, right? And so I love that. I feel like I consider myself extremely fortunate because I didn't choose to be born here, right? I just I consider myself just the luck of the draw, right? And the fact that we grew up around that culture, the Hispanic culture and the Mexican food, and I mean, I love it. And I know people think that San Antonio and Austin has the best Mexican food. No, the Valley has the best Mexican food, and we can have this conversation till I'm blue in the face.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. No disagreement there. Yeah.
But yeah, man, that's really cool. That's awesome. So you're born in Colombia. What city were you born in?
I was born in Bogota.
Bogota. Okay.
Yeah.
Have you been back? Have you gotten a chance to travel or no?
Yes. When I was a kid, I would go back very often. Then I spent a couple years where I traveled to other places. You know, my first time leaving the country somewhere that wasn't Colombia was when I was living in the Valley in high school. My French class took a trip to Europe.
Oh, sick.
Yeah.
Where'd you guys go?
So we went to Paris, London, a city, Bern, Switzerland, I believe, Munich. So it was kind of all over.
Damn, that's
Yeah, we went all
sick
over.
Trip.
Yeah, it was a sick trip. It was with a handful of people from McAllen Memorial High School where I graduated.
Shout out.
Shout out. Shout out Miss Tamez, our French teacher at the time.
Tamez.
Yeah. And
Thebomb.com.
and so that was the first time I left to a place that wasn't Colombia. So I've since then I've loved traveling, and I think because I would go to another country as a kid, it was always something I enjoyed, and that kind of international perspective of seeing the world as this collection of places and other societies and whatnot that are kind of cool to discover and get to know. So that kind of marked a time where I traveled to other places a little bit. And then more recently, I started to go back to Colombia to discover it for myself. You know, not a family trip, which is different, right? To kind of go and find out what that country means to me. Make friends, make connections. Even I've done some professional work out there. Rediscover that place and how it relates to my memories and my kind of emotional roots and things like that. And so, yeah, in a sense, kind of similar to, my ongoing relationship to the Valley as well.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And it's beautiful out there. Have you been
Yeah.
outside of Bogota? And have you gotten to branch out and see what the other cities are like?
Yeah. I've gone to Medellin, which is a place that often people think of Medellin as Colombia. You have
Yeah.
your Maluma and those kinds of artists
For
that
sure.
are from Medellin. Very different from Bogota.
Yeah.
Kind of like a DF Monterrey difference or a New York, Texas kind of difference. And I've gone to the coast a couple times too. So
Awesome. Where, like Santa Marta? Or...
yeah, Cartagena.
Cartagena.
Yeah.
Yeah. My one of my roommates when I was out in Korea, he's from Sincelejo, I think, which is coast.
Yeah, that's the
Pretty
coast.
close to Cartagena.
Right.
Yeah, man. I've only seen it in pictures. I haven't gone out to Colombia yet, but it looks amazing out
Yeah.
there. I would definitely love to come out and just get to experience like the culture and the people. I mean, I want to go and just kind of get lost.
It's great
among
vibes.
The locals,
Yeah, it's great vibes. It's very much a country and a culture that really embraces fun and warmth and hospitality.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Right? Which I guess like the Latino culture in
For
general
sure, without a doubt,
embraces that too.
Without
Yeah.
a doubt. That's so cool, man. You mentioned to me that you took off to New York about 9 years ago. Tell me how you ended up there. How did that happen?
Yeah, it's been an interesting story. I mean, to be honest, I didn't really plan on moving to New York until I kind of made a decision to move to New York. Before that, I spent 2 years living in San Diego. So I moved to California when I graduated from UTPA, now UTRGV, right? So I went to college here in the Valley, got a degree in philosophy. I got to travel abroad through the UTRGV system.
sweet. Okay.
Yeah, lived
Where'd you
in
do that?
Spain, Salamanca.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. You do a semester, 6 weeks?
Semester.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome, dude.
So
Recommend to anybody to study abroad if you get a chance.
definitely, and the program was great. I spent the spring of 2008
Sweet.
out there.
Okay.
Yeah, amazing time, amazing time. And the thing about there is like I went there supposedly to take classes, right? But that wasn't really like the thing that I learned the most from. It was just being like living there and all the people I met and the things I did. I mean, it was incredibly formative. So I did that. Then I finished my degree, and I was kind of trying to figure out what to do next, like many people do when they finish their degree. I still had a lot of intellectual academic curiosities, but I wanted to find a way to make that practical, and kind of design something of a career path for myself, right? That maybe wasn't super traditional. And I had already been influenced to see life that way, to kind of build your own way, right? To look for opportunities in that sense from an experience I had through, we talked about this, through the National Hispanic Institute, NHI, right? And that is an organization that has roots here in the Valley. It's a leadership development organization, right, for youth, Latino youth. And when I was a junior or a sophomore, something like that, they came to Memorial High School. They did a little, one of those things that they call you out of class. They're like, oh, if you want to go check this out, sign up. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I'm down. Whatever, get me out of class. So I went to this little assembly they did, and the founder came to class and he spoke like about the kind of life you want to build and philosophy and thinking deep about things and connecting it to your identity and who you are and seeing your Latinidad as something to be proud of and to use to have influence on the world in a positive way, all these sorts of things. And I was like, oh shit, like, you don't really get that kind of depth in high school often, right? So immediately that caught my attention, and I like introduced myself to the founder, and I was just like, yeah, there's something here, right? So I went and I participated in those programs. It had a huge impact on me. Like the program they're most known for is this youth legislative session where a bunch of 16 and 17-year-olds end up forming their own government and running for different positions. And then, in the evening, you're in a group and you have these like sessions where you just like share life and your life stories and get to know people, right? A camp in that sense too. So very powerful experience as well, right? And you would think 16 and 17-year-olds would find that boring. But no, like you kind of get the opportunity to be treated as an adult and to see yourself as someone that has influence and can be taken seriously. And so when you're given that responsibility to like think about important things, to step out of your comfort zone, speak in a microphone, give a speech right in front of your 200 other people, right, and push yourself to do that stuff has like a huge impact on you, right? So I had a great experience there, and that story kind of circles back in many interesting ways in the future. But thinking about leadership as this thing, right, was on my mind, and it made me get interested in the world of like consulting to organizations, coaching to people, working with groups, and helping groups, teams, agencies, whatever, kind of thrive or become the best that they can be. So I went to San Diego to get a master's in leadership studies because it brought together my more traditional academic interests and being a scholar of sorts with the practical side of like helping advise, consult, and understanding how people in groups operate. And I had this super cool opportunity there because one of their classes was in Spain, and it was a summer class, and you would go to Spain and you would learn from a corporation there that is all owned democratically by their workers. So think of a big company. They have, I think, like 10 billion in profits per year, right? Very big, successful company, thousands of people working, workers, employees. But every worker is an owner. And every few years, they all vote on who their management should be and the kind of job they're doing. So there's an aspect of democracy in this company, right? So kind of like super future looking. And one would think, oh, that's super idealistic, doesn't work. Very successful company, and it's real. So I found that fascinating and super cool, and kind of started to believe that that was part of where society should go to, right? If we say we value like aspects of democracy in our political lives and have the opportunity to vote on things, then why shouldn't we have the opportunity to do that at our jobs, which is like where we spend most of our lives at? And I think unfortunately most people have little voice in what happens at their job, or have kind of toxic experiences often, unfortunately too often, right? And so that was really cool, and I found that amazing. So um, after that master's program, I found a PhD in New York City that had aspects of leadership and policy and like everything that I was interested in like one PhD program. So I only applied to that. I didn't have any other backups. I was like, I'm either going there or I have no idea what the fuck I'm going to do with my life. So I got in, and yeah, the rest is history. And I moved to New York.
That's awesome, dude. You said, "Hey, I just finished some more school. Let me do some more school."
Yeah, yeah.
But that's cool. I mean, you're in NYC. I'm sure there's a lot to do, and I'm sure that it's crazy and busy, and that's awesome. And you're doing something that you enjoy, and that's really cool, man. I'm really happy for you.
Thank you.
Outside of your professional and academic life, what does your life look like? Like, what are you doing when you have time off, and when you just kind of want to unwind and chill? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot to do, but what do you like to do out there?
That's it. Like sometimes different parts of my life can blur together because
I guess, do you have time for yourself?
well, and that's the thing, right? Because as you said, right, I finished more school and I chose more school. I'm very nerdy like that, right? Like I love
cool.
to learn stuff, and even when I'm entertaining myself or having fun, like for me, it's something to learn about. So I love music, and we have that connection as well. And when I lived here in the Valley, music was a big part of my life. It continues to be so, although I don't at the moment, and I'm actually trying to change that, but at the moment I don't prioritize a lot of time for music. When I can, I try. There was a time in high school and in college where I had the band, and you're trying to create cool songs, and it's a whole thing, right? But now, later in life, some of that pressure's off, where you're not kind of competing with other bands, and you're also young and stuff, and so you're insecure about certain things.
So true.
Yeah, and you're kind of just like worried, like who's the most indie type of, who's writing like the less mainstream stuff, and it's all this kind of silliness instead of just what's speaking to you. How are you the process of putting your passion and the things you're experiencing in life into the musical form. I think that later in life, when we all grow up a little bit and we stick to music or return to music, we take some of that pressure off, and we do it because we love it. And so that's pretty amazing. And so whether it's just listening to music and finding new artists, or getting lost on the subway in New York, you're just on the subway, or you're walking through these streets and you have these crazy views all around you, and you're just jamming. Like it's an incredible feeling.
Yeah.
So that's something that I do when I'm not working. That's really awesome. Or also in my creativity, because I do a lot of research. I write, I publish, and that's hard because it's just like constant thinking, and it's a pressure on your brain in an analytic sense. So I take breaks from my writing and my research. But my most productive breaks are when I just like get my acoustic guitar and just fucking jam a little bit. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Sing a little bit, mess around, write some licks, play some riffs, and you just kind of clear yourself, and you get in touch with a different part of who you are.
Yeah, I love it, dude. One of my favorite memories, like back when I was living in Korea, I mean, was that riding the subway and just having my earbuds in and just jamming, like. I mean, obviously, I'm not in I love driving here with the windows down at night with music up. I couldn't do that in Korea. I didn't have a car, but on the subway, there's something really therapeutic about that.
Yeah, there
right?
is. Yeah.
Which is awesome because like I mean, you're not going anywhere. You're just sitting there waiting to get to your destination. What better things to do than just listen to whatever you have on your iPod or your iPhone or whatever you're jamming. But dude, that's really cool. That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that you're still kind of get to jam from time to time. So yeah, you talked about being in the music scene very early on. You're a couple years older than me, so I do remember back in the day, when you started the band or when you had the band because of Danny. Danny and I, your brother, we go way back. But tell me a little bit about that. How did you started a band when you were in high school?
Yes.
For those listeners who don't know about like your musical background and maybe they're not from the Valley, tell us a little about that. How did you start the band? What were your influences? Why did you decide to do that?
Yeah, wow. I would say music for me goes all the way back to my earliest memories. Before I moved to the Valley, I lived in Chicago, and that was like my childhood, right? And some of my earliest memories of that time are just listening to my parents' music, because when you grow up here, you have older brothers that grow up here, you have the music they like being passed down, or your parents have a memory of what's going on musically in pop culture here, right? I didn't have that. I was an immigrant. I don't know anything about pop culture except like Ninja Turtles, right? That was my jam. That was my thing. TMNT was my thing. Secret of the Ooze, So musically, I was listening to the Beatles because my parents were like the Beatles. So it's a good influence to have early in life, right? It was like the Beatles, Colombian, like salsa music and Latin music.
Yes.
So also those influences, classical music like Mozart, Bach, etc. Also kind of good music. And then like MC Hammer for some reason.
Who didn't?
my dad was really into MC Hammer, and
cool.
he got one of those records, and
nice.
And it was one of the jams in the house. But that was kind of it, right? I didn't know about what was big at the time here.
Right.
So fast forward to middle school, and at the end of 6th grade, we were going to try out for a talent show at the time. And, I'd never played, I never jammed with anybody. This was kind of the first time we was going to get friends together and try to play something. I had also just seen the movie That Thing You Do, The Wonders.
That Thing You Do.
Tom Hanks.
Who's in that one? I haven't seen that one actually.
That classic.
I gotta check it out.
Classic.
Okay, That Thing You Do.
Classic Tom Hanks movie.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And in that movie, they win a battle of the bands. They kind of get a song on the radio and become famous, the whole thing. And I was like, that's awesome. Like whatever that is, I want to do that. Yeah. Right. And it takes place in the 60s. But anyways, so I was like jamming to that song, and I was really into that stuff. But one of my friends came over, and he had a CD with him, and it was Dude Ranch from Blink-182.
Classic, dude. So good.
And he's like, well, you like these oldies and stuff, and that's cool, I guess, but like check this out. So he plays Damn It, and I must be like 13, and I hear Damn It for the first time, and I just remember like nothing was the same. Like I was like, what is this?
So good.
And it just like unlocked something.
So good.
So that's like it's a game changer. And then I got interested. Everybody wanted to go to shows in 6th and 7th, most 7th and 8th grade. There was a place called Trenton Point back then. And there was a big local punk scene down here. So I went to a couple of those shows, and I was just like so enthralled by the grittiness and the punk rock music and the vibe and the scene. And then these other guys around my age had a band called Capsid.
Okay.
And they played at this place it turned into a bar, a club later on called Cafs, but before that it was a coffee shop.
Okay.
Called Cafecitos.
Oh shoot, I remember Cafecitos.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so Cafecitos hosted my friends who started this band.
Okay.
And I just show up and I see this and I'm like, holy shit, like this is incredible. So I was sold, right? Like, it was going to be something I was a part of.
Okay.
And that's where the wave of pop punk explodes
Yeah.
at that time.
Did you have a guitar at that point? You're like,
Yeah.
let me get a guitar? Or-
Yeah. My parents put me in guitar lessons.
Oh, nice.
Like in 3rd grade or something.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I knew how to play, but
Cool.
like I just didn't really know how to play
Sure.
popular
like you
songs.
hadn't really been exposed
I
to
wasn't
that.
exposed
Yeah,
to rock,
yeah.
punk rock music and
Cool.
stuff. So, I had been a little impatient about my guitar lessons and practicing, and I wasn't super into it. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, wait a second. Like, this is actually cool, and I can get attention
Yeah.
from,
For sure.
oh, the girls like this.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And so,
Yeah.
and so, I learned power chords. Oh, this is easy, and so, I started teaching myself how to play punk rock and going through. And because I had lessons already, it was pretty easy at that point. So also very influenced by the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Phenomenal band.
The album Californication
For sure.
had a big influence on me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so just started jamming, and then drummers were hard to come by.
Mm-hmm.
It was easier to meet people that played guitar.
For sure.
Or sometimes I'd just find a friend and be like, you, play bass. See what I'm doing? Just play like the root note.
Yeah.
And that would. But then drumming was always the more difficult part. So by this time I was maybe 14, going on 15, and we had a drum set at home, and my brother was like 9, and so I just started teaching him. Like, I don't play drums, but I was like, just do this. Just keep this beat in a very simple way. And he kind of learned to do it. And eventually my parents were like, well, let's put him in drum lessons. And a couple months went by, and his drum teacher was like, oh, this kid's a prodigy. Like, he's going to be amazing.
He started playing super young.
He started playing around 9 years old, 8 or 9 years old. But what he just started getting good really quickly, like really good.
That's awesome.
So I swear to you, in less than a year, it was like, well, we don't need a drummer because this kid can play anything that, basically anybody our age can do.
Yeah, no joke.
So before we knew it, we were like, people came in and out of like my band, but by the time I was entering high school, it was like, 3 16-year-olds and a 10-year-old on the drums.
And that's how
and that was the
yesterday
and
came
that's
about.
how Seems Like Yesterday came about.
Dude, that's awesome. I love it. Dude, I remember meeting Danny in 6th grade and seeing him play the drums, and I was like, bro, this kid is just like you said. I mean, he's in a short amount of time, he was so good. And it was so fun to watch him play. Shout out to that dude, freaking Danny. I mean, it's to this day it's still fun watching him play, because he enjoys doing it. But I think that's so crazy. That
Do you remember when we played a show at Cathy Middle School?
Yeah, I played that. I played that day too.
Yeah.
It was. Well, you probably played more than once, but the time that I remember was we had like some Mother's Day event.
Okay.
And I think that's the first time I ever saw you guys play. We had some Mother's Day event. Danny and I were in I think in Spanish class together. Like this was like 7th grade, if I'm not mistaken. And was it then? Maybe I'm mistaking it. But anyway, I remember you guys played Your Soul Last Summer.
Yeah.
And I think you played like some Taking Back Sunday cover or something like that. And I remember thinking, dude, it's so fun to watch Danny play.
Yeah.
It's so fun. And dude, this was 7th grade.
Right.
Which something like that. 7th or 8th grade. I can't remember.
Right.
But yeah, that was a lot of fun. And it's crazy to think like he was 9, dude, when he started.
Yeah, and it's great. I mean, the other thing too,
you didn't have to look for another drummer.
We didn't have to look for another drummer. It was easier when somebody in the family was in the band too.
Sure, absolutely.
Because
also like you don't just vibe with anybody when you're making music. Like you want it to be with somebody that you know, you can trust, that you feel comfortable with.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, what better than have your brother?
Right. Yeah,
So how
absolutely.
did you get connected with the bass player? How did that happen?
Um, in middle school, I had a kind of like a best friend at the time who played bass, and we would play some Blink songs and stuff like that. But then, like seems like yesterday didn't become a band until uh, sophomore year of high school. And at the time, my friend Cesar, he just looked like a bass player to me, and I was like, dude, I want to start a band. Another friend of mine was playing guitar, and he was like, yeah, let's jam. And so I just like asked my friend, like, buy, get a bass, play bass. I had a bass too, and I was like, here, figure it out. But he
You
also,
had all the instruments. You just needed to
I
find the
had I
people.
had the instruments, yeah, yeah, and like I said, like this is also a huge blessing of mine that my parents really appreciated and valued music. So they had introduced us to instruments, and they didn't know how to play either, but they were just like, we want music to be around
I
you.
love it. That's awesome.
Yeah, so that was a very cool thing. And so I had the instruments, and yeah, my friend started playing bass, and got good. And at that point, we started to write music and write songs, stuff like that.
I love it, dude. Fast forward, I remember getting to see you guys play Battle of the Bands, probably my freshman year of high school. And I remember that year, you guys had Ruben Gonzalez playing guitar with y'all.
Yeah,
Phenomenal musician. Shout out
yeah.
to Ruben. Haven't seen him in years, but Ruben, if you're listening, hope you're doing okay, man. But dude, I remember you guys covered My Hero
By the Foo Fighters.
by the Foo Fighters.
Yeah,
And that was so fun to watch. And Ruben, who's a drummer,
he was playing
was
guitar.
playing guitar.
Yeah, yeah. Because so that's the thing too about like my brother and I were always the core of that band, and for different reasons people might leave the band, but somebody else would join, and we would just kind of keep doing our thing. So we played maybe a total of 4 or 5 Battle of the Bands at Memorial High School. Um, I say 5 because the rule was somebody in the band had to be in high school.
Yeah, that's true. That's
So
true.
my brother and I are
That's so
6 years
true.
apart.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
very true.
so we still played some of those times after I had graduated, because it was just so fun.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, but the my senior year was the Battle of the Bands that I'll never forget. We played At Your Funeral by Saves the Day, and
Solid.
that performance was when people say that you kind of like lose connection to your kind of physical body because you're in the zone. And athletes talk about this, other creative people in general, you just enter a state of flow. And that performance went so well that it was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. And then nowadays, if I'm giving a speech or speaking in public, it's similar to the best. I know that I'm doing a good job speaking to a crowd or an audience if I start to approach the feeling that I had when I used to play in a band.
Do you miss that feeling?
Yeah, of course, very much so. And again, I try to find other ways to replace it.
Yeah, which I guess now, like what you do professionally, when
Yes.
you get to, I mean, you're literally public speaking. You're in a way performing, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's very similar, very very similar. You get a sense of like how do you work a crowd, how do you read a crowd, how do you sense the energy that a crowd is giving you. Um, you know, you kind of at some moments speak louder than in other moments, and all those things I learned from being in a band.
Do you feel like when you started playing in the band, because a lot of people tell me they're like, man, I could never be in a band, because I get stage fright or get nervous. Do you feel like you experienced that when you first started playing?
Definitely yes, and more so because I wasn't a singer, and I had kind of had to be one because nobody else wanted to sing, and I wasn't very confident of my singing for a long time, and it wasn't until kind of like the peak of our playing that I started to feel good about my singing. And so yeah, definitely many moments of feeling nervous, and you kind of learn as you go along to use your anxiety and your nerves and kind of lean into them and turn that into excitement,
Yeah.
turn that into ways to release other forms of energy that connect with an audience.
Yeah. No, I totally agree because I remember that too. Like when I started playing in a band, I remember at first feeling nervous, like feeling like, oh man, you kind of get the jitters and stuff like that. But it is in a way a form of excitement, right? You just kind of,
Yeah.
like I said, have to learn to channel it. A lot of people ask me, like, dude, like, because part of my job now, what I do is I do a lot of presentations too. I present and speak in front of a lot of people, and they're like, how do you do it to look so calm and collected? I'm like, I wasn't always like this. Everyone starts somewhere. No one starts perfectly being a great, excellent public speaker, right? Like
Right.
you have to start somewhere and you develop it. But it's like you said, like learning to lean into it, learning to kind of just embrace it, and understanding that like nobody really is I guess it's not as intimidating as you make it out to be in your head. And once you do it so often, it becomes second nature.
Yeah, no, very few people are like amazing at something right away. You know, maybe there are some that are just like super gifted.
Sure.
But even there, they don't get to their full potential.
Agreed.
You know, like even Jordan, right?
Agreed.
Huge influence of mine
Yeah.
as a child because I
Agreed.
grew up in Chicago in the 90s. So, uh, maybe the most talented athlete of all time.
Yeah.
Right? But like,
No, the most.
yeah, the most.
Everyone's gonna.
Yeah, yeah.
LeBron.
No. I'm a Jordan guy.
Jordan, 100%.
Right, but like he also is notorious for a work ethic,
Yeah.
you know, all that sort of thing. So that just goes to show that like, you know, you just keep doing whatever you're passionate about,
Yeah.
and over time, you learn, you improve, you know, shift, adapt, and that's what takes you to these next levels, right? I've heard so many times, not just in music, but in many different things, that it's the people that just kept going and didn't quit, that end up, you know, achieving some sort of success because they're just the ones that stayed around.
Yeah, agreed. I don't know if you ever saw this commercial. It was a Jordan commercial, one of my favorites, and I forget exactly what it says. I'm gonna paraphrase, but he basically says something like, maybe you're right. He's like, maybe I did make it look real easy, and maybe I was great from the beginning. And then he says something like at the end, it's like, or maybe you're just making excuses, right? Like maybe you're saying like, yeah, I was a prodigy from the beginning, or maybe I made it look real easy, right? But no, it's like he obviously put in the work and had that work ethic. And he didn't make his varsity team his sophomore year,
Right.
and he talks about how his mom was like, hey, you know what? You work all summer and get back there next year, instead of just kind of moping around, because anybody can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the perfect example, like you said, like the work ethic. I mean, obviously, you can have some people who are talented, and sure, that's great, but you'll have people that aren't as talented and will still kind of achieve great things because of their work ethic, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a very important factor, and I try to look for a holistic balance of things. So in my work professionally, which it is very influenced, I think, by my appreciation and love of music and the arts in general. Right, music and the arts, for me, communicates things that you don't understand rationally. A good song speaks to you in a way that isn't a straightforward, rational thing.
This is true.
Right? On so many different levels, right? And so my approach to kind of life and my professional work in politics, in policy, and as a scholar is influenced by that. I'm very passionate about what are the kind of things that a society can do to ensure that people flourish and reach their potential as much as possible, right? So in that sense, there's always a balance between, everybody's different and everybody has different talents, and everybody's on their own journey to discover how they can be the best that they are. But what's different is like different people are living their life under different circumstances that create different pathways for their life. And sometimes those are dramatically different, and sometimes it's much easier for some people. So, in some ways, I'm grateful for a number of support, investments in me, second chances, right? That somebody else might never have. and and that makes a difference, right? And so I'm very interested in ensuring that everybody receives an equal amount of institutions that support them, that allows somebody to, because everybody makes mistakes, right? To learn from those and um, take those in a direction that in the end bring about the best of who we are.
Yeah.
So yes, I think that's key
Yeah, no,
to
you
all of
you bring
this.
up a really important point about making mistakes, because making mistakes is learning, right? At the end of the day, like, nobody comes into whatever field that they're in being the best that they are, or knowing everything that you did.
Right.
If we're talking about Jordan, he talks about how many times he was trusted to take the game-winning shot and how many times he missed. And it's like, yeah, it's because I fail that I succeed, right? Because you get to try these things. I mean, you are gonna fail. You got to be expected to fail. But I guess the only thing, like you said, is like that you keep going, that you keep trying whatever it is that you're doing. You can fail and be like, well, I didn't work.
Yeah.
Leave me alone. Let's get out of here. Let's try something new. And
Right.
some people do get upset. I sometimes get upset when I'm not good immediately at what what I'm trying.
Yeah.
Like, especially with guitar, it's just a perfect example. Like, you're trying to play this riff and you're like, dude, the only reason you get good is because, you practice, you go to sleep, practice, go to sleep, and you come back at it.
Yeah.
Right. But I think that's a really, really good point that you make about making mistakes and having compassion on yourself when you
Having compassion on yourself and receiving support. So, something that a lot of people don't know is, for example, the Beatles grew up in the post World War II era in Great Britain. And after World War II, in the rebuilding phase, there were a lot of transformative changes around the world, but in this case in Great Britain. And part of that was investing in public arts, in education across the country, so that a lot of different people had access to learning about music education and the arts in different kinds of ways. So there was an explosion in British talent. And one of the big factors contributing to that was the investment in the arts that the country in general had committed to, where kids in Liverpool, which is historically a underprivileged, low-income part of the country, were getting opportunities and influences that they had not had before, right? And so that's one example I give about ensuring that support and opportunities are as equitable as possible.
Yeah.
And so we can bring the balance of each of our own journeys in discovering, like, how do we express our passion and our drive in ways that make sense for us, because again, we're different, right? Like, not everybody's going to be a type A personality.
Right.
That's going to be like out there manic the whole time. Some people are just more chill, and that's okay. Like, they're so how do we find out how we best fit into being creative and doing the things we love, but that there are an equitable amount of opportunities and infrastructure and support, et cetera, across the board.
It's so interesting, right? Where you find how sometimes, if, for example, like in public schools, that the arts are the first thing to be cut,
Yeah.
and the first things to go. When you and I, thanks to the arts, we got through some really hard times, or we got through like our formative years, our teenage years. Like, that's kind of what pushed us through, right? Like, I mean, I have a lot of interests. I mean, I liked playing soccer growing up, and I was into sports, but music got me through some really hard times. Music was what kind of, like you said, was something that I could be passionate about at the time. And even though maybe I don't play, or I'm not as involved as I was back then, it still helped me out in a way, like you said, that isn't necessarily rational, or you can't really like measure.
Right. You can't necessarily say, like, what is going to be the outcome of this person learning an instrument or learning music in the next 6 months, right? You're not going to necessarily be able to measure it right away. There's some things you can do, but the impact is so much more profound, and it's lifelong.
Agreed. Absolutely. Do you remember, you watched that movie, Shawshank Redemption?
I'm embarrassed to say I haven't seen that one.
You gotta watch it. But anyway, I'm not gonna spoil it, but I may spoil one scene for you, if that's okay. If you end up watching it, I mean, you'll really like it. But
Okay.
But there's this one particular scene, and it's not giving away too much, but there's one particular scene the whole movie takes place pretty much in a prison, right?
Uh-huh.
And one of the one of the inmates, somehow he's like helping out the warden or whatever, and he finds a vinyl, and he puts it on, and he puts it on the loudspeaker in like the whole prison, and it's like it's some Italian song, some Italian women singing opera. So not even like it's not a pop song or anything. But one of the lines, and I'm gonna paraphrase, I'm probably gonna butcher it, but he's like, "Man, had no idea what those two Italian women were singing, but for those 30 seconds or whatever that was going on, he's like, we were soaring, like
Yeah.
we were just." It was this like euphoric feeling. I mean, you're in a prison, you don't have access to music or what have you, or the arts, and the whole point is that moment of 30 seconds that he put the music on the loudspeaker before he got caught by the guards or whatever. It's a beautiful scene, man. Even if you don't get to watch the movie, look up the
No, I'm
scene,
definitely. I love
check it
film.
out.
I love film, but for some reason, there's like these handful of like really important movies that I haven't seen yet.
Yeah.
So I'm
Is
gonna
this
make
one of those?
Yeah, that's one
Oh,
of those.
shoot, sorry,
No,
dude.
it's fine. It's
But
fine.
you need to watch
didn't,
it.
you didn't give away too much.
Yeah,
but
I didn't give away too much.
but that's gonna go on my list.
Just know Morgan Freeman's narration of that part is
Okay.
incredible. I'm pretty sure you will enjoy
But
it.
when we're speaking about movies, which also have had a huge influence on my work and me, just like music, there's an aspect of it that obviously is like rational, right? Like a plot, and it's very important. But the impact of a good movie hits you on so many different levels that aren't just straightforward.
Oh yeah,
So,
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
that's also.
Do you have a favorite movie?
It's
I know this is a loaded question.
It is. It is such a loaded question. There's a movie called The Fountain by Darren Aronofsky
Okay, I haven't seen that.
that for some reason I'm really into.
Okay.
It's with Hugh Jackman.
Oh, okay.
It's with Wolverine.
Cool. Yeah.
Before he was an X-Men, he was actually a scientist researching cancer cells in an ape, and his wife is sick. But then the movie also has a plot in like 16th century Spain or something, and also a future where he's traveling through the universe in a
Okay.
bubble. It's a trip, but it's dope.
Okay.
I like that movie. I like Interstellar.
I haven't seen Interstellar. Shoot. Okay, I need to check it out.
I didn't watch Game of Thrones for like 10 years. Basically, a year after the final season ended, I started the show.
Okay.
And I really enjoyed it. So I was being a contrarian.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I don't want to watch it. And I finally watched the show, and I thought it was fantastic. So I really like that show, too.
Okay.
So, we're in like the golden age of television
Okay.
these days. So lately, I've been less into movies and into shows.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool, man. The Fountain.
The Fountain,
I'll
yeah.
have to check it
Good
out.
movie.
What was the one with Tom Hanks that you said?
That Thing You Do.
Okay. Another one that I have to see because I didn't see that either. But Tom Hanks has some really good stuff, man. I'm a big fan of You've Got Mail. I love that. Him and Meg Ryan. So good.
Yeah.
So good. It's one of those, like, if I'm sick and I'm at home, I'll put it on. Like, You've Got Mail or something like that. So good. Cool, man. So, again, going back to the fact that, like you said, you never know. You mean... My dad used to say, like, man, I used to love going to skateboarding. He'd be like, man, go play some soccer. Or why are you wasting? He wasn't a big fan of me, like, skateboarding. And he's cool with it now, right? But, like, at the time, it's like, you don't know if buying an instrument is going to make this kid into a professional musician. But
Right.
it's going to impact him forever. And even if he just plays for those teenage years, like, it's going to be a memory that he'll carry with him. And that it's just so... impactful, like you said.
And a lot about the way we've designed our economy and the professional world is kind of a narrow fit. There is a narrow set of ways that you can be successful, and we try to do what we can, right? But it leaves out a lot, and I bring that up because of what you mentioned, how sometimes people want to skateboard, they want to do these other things, right? And they're viewed as a waste of time. Right. But the reason they're often viewed as a waste of time is because they're not fitting into the narrow pool of things that people see, that society sees that you have to do in order to quote unquote be successful. And that's because we operate under a lot of like a scarcity kind of society where if you are not really successful, unfortunately, you're either living paycheck to paycheck or you're just like broke, right? And it doesn't have to be that way. So, again, as like an advocate, somebody in policy advising public officials, people in government, stuff like that, right? Like, I am very big into shifting society towards quality of life, right? Where that's the central concern, right? The reason why we work hard is to be as creative as we possibly can. I'm saying we should. The reason we should work hard is to be as creative as we possibly can, and to enhance our quality of life, everybody's quality of life as much as possible, right? Sports, music, even leisure, like that's all an important part. I mean, like the Europeans are given a lot of vacation time,
Oh yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
right, and that's part of what they see as like their right.
And don't they have a longer life expectancy too?
Yeah, the countries with the highest life expectancy and the highest quality of life are probably the Scandinavian countries and a couple European ones. And it's because people hang out more. They have more time to just like be with their family. You know, you even get paid to go to graduate school. You know, I think like Germany, even if you're not German, if you get into a graduate program, they'll just like pay you, give you a rent. They'll give you an apartment. You mentioned something like this too. If you're going to
Yeah,
teach English,
in Korea, yeah, they pay for your airfare, they pay for your housing. You pretty much just pay utilities to work there. When I was teaching English, but again, that goes going back to investing in education.
yeah, investing in education, investing in people, investing in things that are going to deliver the outcomes that like just create like honestly like a cool society, a good society, something that uh, cares about human flourishing. And given my interest in the arts, in music, human philosophically, art and creativity is for me at the core of human flourishing. Now, it doesn't always have to be like a violin player or a guitar player or in a band, but the same principles apply to a lot of different things that we do. And it's 2023, man. People, famous economists, one of my favorite economists, this guy named John Maynard Keynes, back, in the 40s, when we were getting out of the Great Depression, he was talking about how we would get to a point where our technology and our efficiencies were almost where we wouldn't have to work. We'd have like a 4-day work week, right? And maybe like a 20-hour work day, right? And we had the technology and the efficiency to do that, and then we could spend most of our time like enjoying our lives and doing things that would like develop us as human beings. And then we never did it because like we can go down that rabbit hole, but the point is like that's I think where we should move towards.
Oh, I agree. I
Right?
agree. Don't get me wrong. I like the work week, but sometimes I do think because I like the routine.
Yeah.
But sometimes I do think, dude, if we had the 4-day work week, we could spend more time with family.
Yeah.
We could spend time doing what we like to do, right? And that's quality of life, where you
Right.
get to think about how boring life would be if it's just work, 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 and there's no time for music or film,
Right.
or the arts, or music festivals.
And again, like I also think like as human beings we need structure and to kind of like
For sure.
be committed to certain things. But we overwork people, I think, in our society, and don't pay them enough and overwork them. And so what we're also seeing is people are having mental health breakdowns and they're getting sick, and these things have consequences that are then the costs that we have to deal with after the fact, right? And if we really wanted to, I think, reduce everything from healthcare costs to just maybe not the financial costs, but the social costs of just people feeling like they're on edge all the time, we would invest in these kinds of differences, these different policies and social outcomes that would, yes, we would work and we would have a productive society, but we would also guarantee time for people to do other things as well.
Yeah, for sure. Tell me a little bit about what your day to day looked like. Speaking about like the European countries, like when you were in Spain, what did your day look like? I know people out there it's not like here where you can just go to a restaurant like in the middle of the night, right? Or they close earlier. They have a longer, I guess, break in between like their lunch hour or what have you. Tell me a little bit about that.
Um, Many places would close early, but then some would open late.
Yeah.
So
Because they would have dinner pretty late too.
yeah,
No?
they would have dinner late, so it would like balance out that way.
Yeah.
Where some places would only open late, and then some would close early. But the kind of notion of like a siesta nap
Yeah.
was culturally. That's my dog Charlie. I don't know what's going on there. You all have maybe seen him around here. He's been walking around. He maybe he wants his nap now.
Probably
Yeah.
needs it.
Culturally, the idea of taking a nap around 1 or 2 p.m. is like an important thing.
I'm all for it.
People want to chill. Yeah, people's like, all right, it's time. And also, like, the argument is always that people are actually more productive if they can take a little nap. I mean, I'm a big nap advocate. You know,
For me, it's a power nap. That's all I need.
power naps,
Yeah.
they're key, right? And sometimes I'm kind of on a project or writing some research, and it's very stressful, and I've had to develop ways. And I have ADHD, diagnosed and everything, so that has been a challenge for most of my life too, because my brain is just wired a little differently. For a long time, there's a lot of shame in that. You blame yourself for things. You don't understand that you're different. And again, this goes back to this idea of like, I think it's too easy to just say like, people just make up excuses, but people are different, and we haven't really understood the degrees to which people are different and adapted to, all of those nuances, right? So for many years, I would kind of blame myself for the anxiety that I kind of struggled with, and certain symptoms that can come from having ADHD. Everything from like not being attentive to certain things to like losing things sometimes. That once you know and understand, you can also, on one hand, deal with, address the things that are maybe problematic. But then you could also see your whatever diagnosis you often have as a potential asset as well. A lot of my creativity comes from my ADHD too. So, anyways, I have had to be creative to find ways to be productive. And one of those ways was, as I mentioned earlier, I work for kind of like I'll go all in for like 20 minutes, and I'll take like a break to play guitar, or I'll work a couple hours and then I'll take a power nap. And I won't be like, oh, I'm being lazy, blah blah blah. I'll be like, no, I deserve this power nap, right? Take a little power nap, then you're ready to go. Yeah. Boom, you come back and you keep working.
100%, dude. I was reading an article the other day about like I think it was one of those about like the 4-day work week and stuff like that. And they talked about how like 8 hours a day is not ideal because it is physically impossible to have 100% focus 8 hours.
Right.
That's why they tell you when you take your lunch break, don't eat at the desk.
Right.
Leave your desk, go eat somewhere, whatever. Just it's not encouraged because of the same fact. Like you come back, even the hour that you take away 30 minutes for lunch, you'll come back at least a little bit refreshed.
Right.
Nobody can say 8 hours just completely focused on what you're doing. The breaks are help productivity.
And if we lower some of like the demands of people feeling like they have to work like 8 hours or whatever, people can do more in less time when it's just managed better, right? Yeah. Also makes me think about like in school, like after lunch, you never wanted to be the teacher of a class after lunch.
Oh yeah, dude, for sure. Because then you're like, oh, that's when you get that. Everyone's like full from their food, and you just want to nap. And 100%, man.
Everybody remembers like as you're getting closer to 8th period, and everyone's just like, I gotta get the fuck out of here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And those last 3 months, like before the year ends, this is the worst, especially senior year when you're just like done. Yeah, man.
But that's the thing too about like education in general. There's so much I think improvements we can still make where we teach so much to the test, and it's about kind of what you can memorize and passing that exam. or doing good on whatever test you have to do. One thing about being in academia, and it's far from perfect, but you can kind of start to learn about other ways to approach learning and pedagogy and curriculum, more creative ways, where it isn't just memorize these things. It's actually like integrating what you're learning with the world, with your life, with your dreams, with what's important to you. Um, maybe it's not. People complain like, oh, learning algebra or whatever. When am I ever going to use this? But it's about the whole story of where mathematics comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and on one hand, like, we can improve our cognitive abilities learning math, but also there's this like fascinating story that has led to all kinds of breakthroughs in science and things like that. So I'm a big advocate of making education something that is unique to you as a person and to the social surroundings that you're in. Right, like education is not something that's just passed down to you, but something that you co-create with your mentors, with your educators, to create the world around you. It brings about what we do, what we care about, how
Oh
we
yeah.
treat each other, how we treat ourselves. Like, all of that is such a, I think it's a more profound approach.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think at the end of the day, you told me earlier that you're going to school and you're doing your PhD, but because it's fulfilling. At the end of the day, if it is fulfilling, if you're doing something that you that aligns with your skills and your interests and what you want to do in your life, by all means, by all means. Tell me a little bit about what's on the horizon for you. What do you see yourself doing? In fact, I know you're working on your doctoral program. You're working at a university, which is awesome. You're doing consulting. Do you have something in mind where, like, hey, I'd like to work towards this in the next 5 years?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So I've spent the last
And you don't have to have an answer. You could be like, dude, I have no
no,
idea.
yeah, I think about this often.
Cool.
I've spent the last 3 years or so involved in research as a college professor and continuing to work and hopefully soon complete my PhD. And the story there is, I know before we started the interview, we were talking a little bit about this, but I started a PhD, and then midway through, my good friend at the time, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, was elected into Congress, and I was advising her campaign. So after that happened, I got involved in politics. I did a lot of public speaking. Went to spoke in Austria, in Colombia,
Nice.
in different states here in the U.S., mainly around climate change. That's become a very, very important issue for me, and it's a priority for me because I think like that's like the thing that we can't fuck around with too much. It's like it's such an approaching serious, urgent issue. Overcoming that problem. So that's a something I've been doing, and it's slowed down the kind of formal aspect of finishing my doctoral degree. But as I was telling you earlier, what I've also learned in that process of being like a practitioner and hanging out with other academics with a goal of influencing legislation and influencing public opinion has been a huge personal and intellectual transformative experience. So that's to say, yeah, I'm planning to finish that PhD soon, but I'm involved in some work in New York City around community development approaches that link back to what I was saying earlier about businesses that are democratically owned and managed. So we are working in Astoria, Queens, where I live, through an organization called the Astoria Worker Project, working with immigrants, working with gig workers and other people who are in vulnerable situations where maybe their pay is low, or it's easy, their work is precarious and unstable. And so as a strategy to get around that and provide some stability and some more dignity into people's lives, introducing and developing some of these like democratic businesses, cooperative businesses. So that's one thing that I do. And I hope to continue to build out a brand, kind of like my entrepreneurial side, as somebody that is working with leaders in nonprofit sustainability world, social change, social impact. Everything from a nonprofit or a foundation to even some corporate social responsibility, projects, things like that. But kind of working with leaders, consulting and coaching with some of these folks to do that, continuing to do policy advising around climate change, and some of these things are important to me. Writing a book is on the agenda in the next couple years for sure. Putting some of my ideas into online courses where that can be supplemental to an education in at the master's or even bachelor's level. So it's like if you want to learn policy in a way that is kind of accessible and can really fast track your interest, whether it's in climate change or inequality or whatever, design a course myself and put that out there for people. I have a podcast at the moment called Funny Money, where we talk about the economy from kind of a progressive perspective. We bring in a lot of great guests and speakers who are central to things like the Bernie Sanders campaign and other things like that. So, and we got accepted into the voting stage of South by Southwest.
Oh, dude, that's awesome.
Yeah, yes. So that's very exciting. Hopefully that continues to go well. I have a lot of optimism about that. So it looks like 2024, there's a good chance we'll be at South by Southwest talking about policy and sustainability. So continue to do that. So in a sense, it's like just kind of growing the platforms that I am getting my ideas and my research out to the world in different kinds of ways. Books, online classes, YouTube content, things like that.
I love it, dude. Seems like there's plenty to do, and I'm excited for you. I hope everything goes well with South by. Best of luck, man. That'd be really awesome. But yeah, dude, I'm excited for you. I'm really glad that you reached out and we got to link and we got to connect and talk about all this. And I think this is a perfect place to wrap it up. We just lost the GoPro. The battery died out on us, but it's cool. I'll put a little logo there on something. So, but dude, yeah, that's awesome. I think that's a good place to wrap it up. I wanted to thank you and just say, hey, man, I really enjoyed getting to chat with you. And hopefully maybe we can do this again. We'll leave the door open for maybe another
Absolutely.
part 2 or something.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. If you're interested, viewers and listeners, my social media is Andres in Theory. So check me out.
Where can we check out your podcast?
My podcast is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts.
Funny Money.
Funny Money. Our social media handle is Pod Funny Money on now X, the app, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok.
So true.
And yes, would love to connect and chat to anybody that's interested.
Love it. Well, thank you, Andres. It's been a blast. Appreciate you, welcoming me into your home and your hospitality and letting me hang out here with Charlie. Hopefully we can do this again. But in the meantime, thanks again. Thank y'all again so much for listening tonight. Y'all take care and have a good one.